I'm Bill Calin. I work with the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, and I have responsibility for the new agriculture environmental impact assessment regulations recently introduced by the Minister. The reason for the introduction of the regulations is very simply to address a court case that Ireland was faced with before the European Court of Justice at the behest of the Commission for failure to implement fully the Environmental Impact Assessment Directive, which was introduced in 1985. There are a number of aspects that were covered under the directive, and they fit into two categories, broadly Annex 1 or Annex 2. So farmers who, for example, to date have been introducing something like a wind farm or large-scale pig establishments or poultry units that would be licensed, they have been used to this impact assessment for some time. But at farm level, in relation to three particular categories that are covered under these regulations, and they are notably the restructuring of rural land holdings, in other words hedgerow removal, the use of uncultivated lands for intensive agriculture, principally underutilised land or uncultivated land being improved and being brought up into intensive production, and finally land drainage, are all covered under the regulations. They were signed into law on the 8th of September by the Minister for Agriculture, and simultaneously the planning and development regulations were changed by the Minister for Environment to cover any developments in relation to particular wetlands. The categorisation division arises because wetlands are seen as particularly important areas for conservation and have been retained within the planning and development section, while the Minister for Agriculture has assumed responsibility for the rest of the areas, for a number of reasons, principally because we have an expertise within those areas and can therefore conduct the assessments as required. But equally so, it's understandable that farmers would certainly appreciate being able to come to the Department of Agriculture in relation to this activity because of a long understanding and a nationwide presence. In relation to uncultivated land, this is land that would have high particular value for biodiversity point of view. So, for example, they would be species rich, or areas of heathland, uplands, that type of area. And where a farmer would propose to actually intensify the production on that land and cultivate it, in other words through ploughing, reseeding or increasing fertiliser use, then above certain thresholds they must come to the Department of Agriculture and seek approval to carry out that work. There are two really important thresholds in relation to that. One is 5 hectares, above which if a farmer wishes to do that work, will come and seek a screening decision by the department, and we will assess whether or not an impact will arise through the development. At a much higher level of 50 hectares, a farmer will be required to conduct a mandatory impact assessment of that. That will not arise in many cases, but certainly is legislated for, and the thresholds in relation to that are at 50 hectares, so it's quite significant. In both situations, effectively approval is required to carry out work on such lands before it's conducted. The implementation of this certainly needs big buy-in and a cooperation by farmers to ensure it's fully implemented. But what the department has done to facilitate that is the regulations are in place, and we're currently working on guidelines which will clarify and I suppose simplify the actual regulations, so that in farmer speak they will understand what's covered and at what levels, and then can come to us in through application, and we will conduct screening or consent as required. In relation to screening, the first what we've done is we're keeping a simple system of an application which will have no application fee and will have what we believe is a prompt response time of 4 to 6 weeks outside of Natura lands. And what we're simply asking farmers is to supply us with basic information such as name, address, herd number, the landed parcel identification number, and then a brief description of the activity that's going to be carried out and who will be carrying out that activity. We will then do the rest in terms of the assessment that's involved in the screening decision, looking at issues like impact on water, on the biodiversity, on the location where the activity is going to be carried out. The regulations are currently up on our website, on the Department of Agriculture website, and when on completion of the guidance notes, the guidance document, we intend to circulate that to all farmers so that they're fully brought up to speed in terms of all the issues. But I would stress the actual regulations are in place currently, and if a farmer wishes or proposes to do some work, we would the draft guidelines are on our website. They can consult with those, but equally so we would encourage them to contact the department and we can clarify any issues for them that they might have.